Betsy and Thomas here for the American Intelligence Media. Today we'd like to look at the tweets of Donald Trump of May 8th, 2019, plus we have some other updates for you. For those of you that follow both our main site, aimfortruth.org, and follow us here on YouTube, you'll notice that we've done a little shifting and rearranging. We have to do that now because this information war is getting pretty intense. We do not want to have our channel censored, so we're making some adjustments. So you will also note that the memes that everyone loves, and I appreciate the shout outs because it does take a lot of work to put them together, we're going to keep those in a separate video so that you can enjoy them with some nice soothing music, and we'll just leave our talks here with one screenshot. Okay, Thomas, you ready to get started?
Yes, Betsy, I am.
Well, the first tweet is case closed, and that's Mitch McConnell standing there talking about the stages of death for the Democrats, and he announces that the Mueller report has ended and the case is closed.
Complete big fat friggin' Mitch McConnell, Chinese spy, anti-MAGA globalist response. No, it is not over. It has only began, and you can see that in the Judiciary Committee hearing in the House right now, live, where they are arguing, and what you're hearing is that all these representatives they're awakening. They are woke. They are basically saying words like, this is treason. This was a coup. This was Obama. This was right to the top. So Mitch McConnell, you can always count on Mitch playing the globalist card.
Well, he doesn't want us to look any further. He wants this thing to be shut down because, you know, his wife is the Secretary of Transportation, knee-deep with the Chinese in that area. And we're going to find out as we peel back the onion on McConnell that he is very corrupt. But right now he's running in Kentucky for the next term, and there's nobody on the horizon that can beat him. So Trump has thrown in his support for Mitch McConnell. So don't expect him to leave.
Trump, unfortunately, has to work every single day with a bunch of junkyard dogs, a bunch of scoundrels, a bunch of scumbags, alligator swamp creatures. I mean, these are bad people, and Mitch McConnell is right there at the top. When you say Mitch McConnell, sit him at a table with Nancy Pelosi. They're the same. That's the uniparty. We are so lucky that Trump is able to twist his arm to actually get something done. Now, what is not going to happen is what McConnell wants, which is move on. We are not moving on. No, we're not moving on, Mitch. As a matter of fact, we're not giving it to a special counsel. We're not giving it to an independent counsel. We're going to have the Department of Justice, for the first time in a very, very long time, actually do their job.
And I know you say that, and I see a lot of people, they're very excited about Bill Barr, but I'm holding out because I was burnt with Jeff Sessions, and of course Matt Whitaker couldn't do much because he really wasn't appointed the Attorney General. He was just holding space. But Bill Barr hasn't done anything yet except give some nice testimony in Congress. I want to see some arrests, some indictments, and I'm not talking about low-level folks. I'm talking about the high-level folks. We need to see Hillary Clinton arrested, Andrew McCabe, James Comey. These are the high-level arrests that citizens must demand in order to say that Bill Barr is doing his job. Okay, next tweet.
Well, he said he's going after the upper echelon.
He says it, but
and now
saying it and doing it's two different things.
Every Republican is saying out loud in the news that this was treason, that this was a coup d'etat that is still going on, and that the impeachment that is trying to happen in the House with the majority, the Democrat majority, is nothing more than a continuation of the initial Comey 28 crimes of treason, which then turned into the John Brennan counterintelligence crossfire hurricane, which then turned into, and this is beautiful, because now there's something that's out in the news which I should clarify. Andrew McCabe already said that he opened an investigation on Trump the moment that he fired Comey. Why? Because he already had a counterintelligence investigation going on, and he needed to confuse everybody because Comey said there was no investigation 9 times, and 3 to the president, 3 to the public, 3 in testimony. McCabe came out and had to start an investigation on Trump for obstruction of justice for firing Comey? That's completely absurd. It's not even possible. But that is to confuse and to conflate the Crossfire Hurricane counterintelligence operation with Andrew McCabe's obstruction of justice investigation. And when they say that Mueller is the continuation of that obstruction of justice, that is a lie. It's a continuation of the Russia investigation conducted by Strzok and Page with James Baker and Comey and Andrew McCabe and John Brennan. I mean, don't get the two confused, okay? And we already knew this. So when it says that the unsealed Comey notes came out recently that demonstrate that this happened, we already knew it happened because we had the testimony of Andrew McCabe.
The next two tweets I'm going to read together, and this has to do with the tax returns that, the 10 years of tax returns that they got from Donald Trump's past. I mean, like, whoop-de-doo. But, you know, it's a big deal to Democrats who are socialists who've never built anything in their life, so they would have no reason to take off building losses on their tax returns. So here we go. Real estate developers in the 80s and 90s, more than 30 years ago, were entitled to massive write-offs and depreciation, which would, if one was actively building, show losses and tax losses in almost all cases. Much was non-monetary, sometimes considered tax shelter. You would get it by building or even buying. You always wanted to show losses for tax purposes. Almost all real estate developers did, and often renegotiate with banks. It was a sport. Additionally, the very old information put out is highly inaccurate, fake news, hit job. And it really is, because this is what you want to avoid taxes, not evade, but avoid. And so that's why you hire tax attorneys to show you where you can take your deductions so that you don't have to pay extra money to the IRS. So shame on Donald Trump for not wanting to line the pockets of the IRS.
Well, and as he has a huge ego, and that's okay because he deserves it. It's not fake, he is in fact a genius and people don't give him credit for it. So first off, let's break this down. These tax returns are from a long, long time ago. What does that have to do with today? 30-year-old tax returns. And they are not tax returns. They are tax transcripts for specific years, which do not show the adjustments that happen for people who own things. Sometimes their taxes are 5 years being adjusted in the past. You cannot look at somebody's tax returns if they have great assets and figure anything out. That's a fact. Now, why did they have them? They said they were going to get them directly from the IRS, and remember, this was the leak that they were going to get them from one of their favorite leakers in the IRS. Wrong. It's from a lawsuit from a long time ago, and it's incomplete, and they're incorrect. And the people who've looked at them say that, of course, you can't determine jack from tax transcripts because they don't show the assets of the person, the fixed assets. And when you're a real estate person, as Trump is explaining here, those assets are up and down, backwards and forwards. You may own billions of dollars worth of stuff and be in great debt. Now, remember, the $10 billion that they say Trump was worth when he started running for the president, he did not determine that. He stated he was maybe worth $4 billion. And so when it came out that he was worth $10 billion, he goes, well, that's their report. It's not my report. Where do you think they got that report? That report's going to be much more accurate than a 30-year-old tax transcript. So he himself even said he wasn't worth $10 billion. But then once it came out official that the government literally assessed him. Now, I don't know that this has ever been done in human history, that a president, that someone running for president, that they had their assets completely examined. I forget who it was that did it. And then it was stamped by the government. That was after they did 2 FBI investigations on him and his father. So when it comes down to all of this, what they really want is his last 6 years of tax returns. They ain't going to get one of them. Not one of them. There is no law that says he has to turn those in, and you wouldn't understand them even if you had them, and they're a huge stack of paper. It's kind of like Nadler demanding all the evidence on the Mueller report, which is literally, as I said the other day, and now it's been confirmed by a member of the House who was speaking in the testimony, stated that there are millions and millions and millions of pages. And you can't, you know how long it would take to redact millions of pages when there are 14 to 17 continuing cases going on with this grand jury indictment? Impossible. So what they're asking, so do not get worried about this contempt of Barr and Trump asserting executive privilege. He could have exerted executive privilege a long time ago. He's just tired of it, and everybody's tired of it. And I hope he does exert executive privilege.
The other thing, too, Thomas, is that the news has run out of material to cover. For the last 2 years, they've been trying to push their lie on the American people. We didn't buy it. Now, what do they report on? They're so far behind what the real news is. And the real news is that this coup d'etat, the origins of it is not just in the swamp. We're going to look, it goes all the way to England. And that's what Mitch McConnell and people like him don't want, John Solomon too. They want to have you wrap it up and see that it's just an Obama thing. Well, that's great. We need to see Obama behind bars, but we need not stop. We continue to look at the Brits, because until we overthrow the British rule of America, we're never going to be free of this, Thomas.
Absolutely, and we got to start at the top, as you're suggesting. We got to start with Obama here, and then start with the Queen and her Privy Council, because this is Crown Gate. This is the British Gate. This is, yes, Obama was being manipulated by the Brits. Obvious. Look at the way Christopher Steele manipulated the FBI. Then when they fired him, he used the Orrs, Bruce Orr and Nellie Orr, as the backdoor to the FBI and the DOJ. Nothing could stop him. Nothing was going to stop the British incursion attack against our election. And so what we're seeing here is a beautiful circumstance of people waking up every single day. Every day, if you're in the Senate or the House and you're paying attention to the news, and you weren't paying attention to Aim for Truth and Americans for Innovation, your eyes get bigger every single day as you awaken to how big this is. What I like is that people are saying it now.
And yet, the media is silent about Allison Saunders coming over and having dinner with the Orrs, and a lot of other things that we have found out that would certainly, if I was working with a major newspaper, I would see as a cutting piece for investigative journalism. But you don't really get investigative journalism. You get these weak soy boys that stand there, talking heads, just telling you stuff you already know. So don't be fooled. Now you want to move on?
Well, Grassley sent a recommendation for indictment for Nellie Orr, not only for lying, but they're going to find out about Allison Saunders, the head prosecutor of the Queen, having dinner with the Orrs in their humble little house. 4 days before the Trump Tower physical wiretapping of Robert Hannigan, another Queen asset from the General Communications Headquarters, the head of basically their NSA spying unit in Britain. So what we have here is that, yes, the Congress may be sending recommendations to the Justice Department. But as we had seen before, and as we see with Christopher Wray now, Christopher Wray ignores everything. Someone could be murdered in his office in front of him and he would not notice.
Well, Christopher Wray is Senior Executive Service, and he is there to protect the swamp. So, of course, don't be surprised when he sits there and gives you no answer. He was asked the other day in testimony, well, was there any spying going on? Well, he gave you anything but a yes or no answer.
Yes, and remember, Christopher Wray was down lower on the pecking order, so he was not part of Comey's bunk buddies. But the second he got in office, he did testimony, which said that he had the 33,000 missing Hillary emails in 2 different forums, a jump drive and 6 CDs. He has all of the proof that shows that top secret materials were on everything that Hillary had, and it was going out to everyone. And the Chinese had copies, and everybody had copies but the people they say had them, Russians. Remember the Russians? Putin was lying back in bed smoking a cigarette after having... the bed partners.
How did you know he was having a cigarette?
Because the bed partners of Obama and Hillary had made him so happy that he was just sitting back. He didn't want Trump to win. That's insane. He wanted Hillary to go on, giving him all the money, no sanctions, no nothing, unbelievable. The reset button, remember? We're talking about Hillary was in bed with the Russians, with Obama, and the Russians didn't do anything for the election.
Okay,
Nothing.
Our audience already knows all the Russia stuff. Let's move on to, what are they seeing today? So when you see Christopher Wray testifying at the FBI, our audience knows he's SES. He's there to protect the swamp. And when you see if Gina Haspel comes up, again, remember, she's CIA. She's SES. She was in the London office when all of this stuff was being planned. She is no friend of Patriot. So don't believe anything that they're trying to make you believe to be otherwise. They are there to protect the swamp. Now, let's move on. Just spoke to Mary Barra, CEO of General Motors, who informed me that subject to a UAW agreement, etc., GM will be selling their beautiful Lordstown plant to Workhorse, where they plan to build electric trucks. GM will be spending $700 million in Ohio in 3 separate locations, creating another 450 jobs. I've been working nicely with GM to get this done. Thank you, Mary B. You're a great governor, and Senator Rob Portman. With all the car companies coming back and much more, the USA is booming. And of course, for people who don't know, Mary Barra is a Hillary Clinton suck-up. So she is out to destroy Trump by swinging her big baton as a CEO of GM.
Yeah, and what he's done here, no president's ever been able to do before. When we have intervened in things like this, it's usually the Congress, and that's just given him money through appropriations. No president in American history has ever just sallied up to what used to be one of the biggest corporations in the world and said, you will do it my way, and you will do it now. And that's what's happening. So in the old days, they used to speak softly and carry a big stick. Trump speaks loudly and carries a big stick, and he hits them with the stick if he needs to. It's not a threat. No more threats. He does the same thing to OPEC. No president in U.S. history has been able to turn and speak to OPEC and say lower prices and have it happen. No, never happened. That was set up by Henry Kissinger, that OPEC would rule the world. And now OPEC doesn't rule the world, and because of Trump's policies, we rule the world. We weren't even on the list of oil producers because we had sold out all of our oil to the Brits and to Standard Oil Seven Sisters through foreign countries, as well as we basically just ignored our oil. Now, what are we doing? Number 1 oil producer in the world, and that's even after they've stopped some of Trump's policies, which, he deregulated offshore drilling and so on and so forth, which made us far beyond anyone, far beyond Russia, Kazakhstan, anyone. Remember, first time in history, 2 years from going to not on the list to the top in 2 years. That's what Trump is up to. So what he's doing there in Ohio is the first time that we've ever had a president who can make markets. He makes markets, manufacturing markets, job markets, stock markets, trade markets, tax markets. He makes the markets. He is the news.
The real obstruction of justice is what the Democrats are trying to do with this attorney general. That's a quote from Congressman Jim Jordan.
As I said, these, if you really want to watch some great summaries of what we've been telling you for 2.5 years, listen to what these House of Representatives are saying in the Judicial Committee right now. Because Jim Jordan's out there, and Jim, oh my, when he's done with you, you have been pinned and you lost the wrestling match. Very clearly, very quickly. And so he's...
Yeah, I hear a lot of talk in Congress, and it continues to go on. When am I going to hear the heavy metal bars closing and seeing Hillary behind bars? That's what I'm getting tired of waiting for. I want to see some high-level indictments, Thomas.
Well, as Jim was pointing out, look at all the people who have been fired, demoted, or quit, or being investigated. And he listed, a lot of them. Now, remember, Loretta Lynch needs to be on that list because she jumped ship early, but Comey has already said, if I go down, Lynch goes down. I'm going to turn her in for what she did in New York because she threatened over the Wiener laptop when basically the New York police said, we're bringing this out whether you like it or not, whether the feds come and take the laptop and try to hide it and obfuscate the whole thing, which is exactly what happened. Loretta Lynch got in, and then they started going politically back and forth with New York City police and the way they killed this young man when they were arresting him, and her threats and their threats and back and forth, and then the tarmac, and then she quit. Okay? The most guilty quit first. So we can look. Who quit first? Hillary Clinton. And then who replaced her? John Kerry. Not a word is anybody saying about John Kerry in this whole thing. 100% guilty because he was the person in charge of Victoria Nuland, who was the first person to get the first speck of supposed intel that was then rumored to John Brennan, who without any evidence whatsoever opened a counterintelligence crossfire hurricane, it was named, operation against President Trump, against Trump as he was running for president. This is completely insane and absurd. So what do we have to do? We have to go after Loretta Lynch. We have to go after Sally Yates, the person who wouldn't obey Trump's orders. We have to go after Dan McGahn. That's the reason that Trump has to use executive privilege, and he's telling everybody, don't answer the subpoenas. Why? Because Dan McGahn's not on his side, never was. They bankrupted Dan McGahn. They took his house. They ruined his life. He's angry at Trump. So Dan McGahn's testimony before Mueller is about the only damnable evidence that there was, that and what Cohen said, and everything Cohen said was a lie. So remember that now things are coming, even Comey's 302 notes are now, some of them being unsealed. And what we need to remember is that Eric Holder was a perfect example of the fact that the Attorney General was held in contempt for 100 days and nothing ever happened. So Barr can be held in contempt for as long as you want. Nothing will happen unless the Justice Department itself takes action, which they can't and won't. And that's the reason they wanted lawyers there in the House to interview Barr so they could trick him up on certain questions concerning obstruction so that they could still use that for impeachment. But Matt Gaetz said in his beautiful testimony before the Senate, before the Judiciary Committee of the House, that this is nothing about anything except impeachment. Mueller was supposed to hand over the impeachment baton to the Democrats in the House, and they're doing a very, very, very bad job of it.
Well, it's hard to impeach when you have nothing to impeach on. So, and then we go on to another tweet. Okay, go ahead. You wanted to say one more thing?
We forget that all this came from the White House, and then they all the time skip over the Department of State. Natalia Veselnitskaya, all the Russians they used, all the Russian assets, every single thing. Christopher Steele, Dearlove, Wood, Downer, all of them, that was the State Department. John Weiner said this when he left and said that APCO was the way that Hillary was actually receiving $20 billion, not $2 billion, $20 billion, he said, in repeated statements to the press, which I heard myself. And so what we have here is a perfect example of the fact that during Obama's time, Eric Holder and the Department of Justice, the State Department with Hillary, and later with Kerry, Department of Justice with Loretta Lynch, completely corrupt, could not be any more corrupt. And yet they try to say that the White House doesn't even talk to the FBI and the DOJ. Incorrect. Remember, they all work for the White House. But now that the tables are turned, oh no, everything is the executive branch. No matter what happens, William Barr? Well, that's the executive branch. Not during the Obama administration, it wasn't. They swore that Obama never, ever once even spoke to anybody in the FBI, even though, let's remember, Susan Rice said that it was Comey sitting there with Obama and Biden and Sally Yates and Susan Rice and others when they clearly said, okay, we will keep you posted on the entire Christopher Steele dossier, Mr. President. So Mr. President knew the entire thing from the beginning. I tell you, he was involved from December 2015, which they won't find out for some time probably, but that's really what's going on.
Well, as a citizen, I feel cheated. These people cheated 2 years out of an administration that could have been MAGA all the way. Instead, we've been having to fight their lunacy the whole time. So I want to see a way for 2 years to be added to Trump's first term. And maybe what we need to do is to clearly show that this administration went rogue and was operating the government outside of the Constitution. It was a rogue faction. And that Trump was elected, but he was still within that rogue faction, And now if he can step outside of it, clamp him down, get him in jail, maybe we can get 2 more years. Well, that's my hope. And I'm sure there are brighter brains that can figure out how to do it. But the Democrats stole it from every American who voted for Trump. For 2 years, they have kept us from going full steam ahead.
After he gets elected a second term, which he will, he could declare martial law for all these treasonous trials that have to happen and not give up his office until those people are prosecuted, because the national security of America is being threatened at the highest level, from the highest to the lowest level. And until all of them are in jail and have been prosecuted, we do not know that they are not continuing. So, one Valerie Jarrett could still be running the whole thing from the Obama bunker there with Eric Holder. So he could, in fact, stay in office. And so you might get your 2 years because martial law, which is all set up now because of Obama, 13 different executive orders, a pin could drop in Washington, D.C., and that's excuse enough to declare more than martial law. This is the most effective form of martial law ever created in history. It controls your and my bank accounts.
They made the laws because that's what they were going to do to us when Hillary came into power. So while the laws are still on the book, let's use them for good, and let's totally clean up the swamp, and let's get on the track of what America is about: the rule of law, the Constitution.
Absolutely.
The next tweet: shouldn't 2015 and 16 be revealed? How intelligence agencies, FBI, tried to sabotage a particular campaign, never been done before. And that is a quote from Steve Forbes.
Well, Betsy, you can testify that, in fact, I was just yawning just now. Literally yawning, because it's so boring to me that these people are only getting woke now.
I know. Maria is so far behind, and I really like her. She's such a bright woman. But my gosh, please bring your narrative to where it is today, girlfriend.
Do a Google.
Yes.
Google Allison Saunders.
Steve Forbes is so irrelevant to everything.
Oh, it's just unbelievable what we're witnessing, and it's just so boring to watch these people slowly wake up. And I think you and I both are a little bit, we feel a little tired because here I go again, I'm yawning because
that's why we're not
once
here.
Again I'm going to have to state things that they have yet to get to, which is just disturbing because they're supposed to be investigative journalists. They're paid millions and millions, if not billions of dollars to these journalists, mainstream media, but us citizen journalists are leading the pack by 2 years because that's how long it's taking for them to catch up. It's really disturbing.
The only reason that we post them here and there is because they have a platform where they can make a video, have an interview, and then we can grab it from YouTube. But really, these reporters aren't worth anything. We could easily replace them with some really fantastic independent media people out here, but we don't have the tools to do that kind of work with.
Why don't they go get the clip of Christopher Wray testifying that he has the 33,000 emails in 2 different forms?
Because Maria and Steve Forbes are really part of the swamp. They really don't want to see America go forward. If they did, they would be telling the full story and going all the way, but they don't.
Well, they have to please the people who buy commercials.
Then, all right, we are in a war. This is an information war, and people are taking sides. And Maria and Steve have obviously called out their side, which is keep the people controlled and the information limited.
We have seen it again and again. Money buys the news, period. If somebody gets in trouble, then they don't get the support from advertisers, and then they get deplatformed, they get fired, even in mainstream media. Okay, that basically, add that up, folks. I can't believe that so many times, and I'm sorry for those people who are upset with me bragging all the time, saying we're the only ones. But by golly, we're out there looking every day to find anybody else who is saying any of this, and they're not.
And they're not there. And then it shouldn't be a surprise that the social medias are doing all the censorship and shutting you down. We've been telling you that this was going to happen. 2 years ago, we went and broke a big story about how social media was really stolen from Leader Technologies and Michael McKibben. And then we showed you how it was weaponized against us. We showed you the propaganda war that was started by Cecil Rhodes and Alfred Milner. This is still going on today. It is their intent. They stole this, they use it against us as a weapon, and they fully intend to shut us up.
The Mercers in Breitbart, perfect example. When Old Man got out, gave it to his daughter, what happened? Breitbart had to, right next to good articles about Trump, put absolute garbage
Breitbart is just
articles.
A crappy piece of digital rag now.
Okay, same thing with Fox. When the commercials buy the news, guess who owns the news? That's as simple as it is. If it's going to come to corporations owning the news through their money, then we have to understand corporations hate humans. Hate humans. They're not human. They never go to jail.
Well,
corporations do not go to jail.
They want to farm humans for everything we have, our ideas, our labor, our money. And then when they're finished farming us, they cast us aside and move on to the next group.
And we can be prosecuted, but they can't. And if they're high-ups, then they know about, exculpatory evidence and the rules of evidence. They know Robert Mueller, or they know a Rod Rosenstein, or they know somebody, and don't worry, they never get prosecuted. Even when they do, it's nothing more than the price of doing business, a very small tax when they actually get caught. Isn't that right, Mr. Comey, who worked for Bridgewater? Isn't that right, Mr. Mueller, who worked for Mellon Optima? I mean, these are the biggest rip-off hedge funds in the world, and that's who they worked for, making tens of millions of dollars a year, and they know nothing about hedge funds or stocks. So why would they pay these lawyers that much money? Because it's rigged. Because they know the judges it goes before when they get caught. And every one of them, industrial espionage. No such thing as a corporation that doesn't have subliminal programming, that doesn't have unethical actions, that doesn't step on the face of their competitors. No such thing. No such thing. So once we realize that, then why would you listen to news being paid for by corporations that want to keep you a slave?
Right now, just follow the Trump tweets. That will lead us out of all this craziness. I mean, you have to look at a few things here and there because they have platforms where you want to see an interview, but to be very discerning. They do not have your best in mind. Next tweet, big court win at our southern border. We're getting there, and wall is being built.
Well, here's the deal. Some people want that wall to be built faster, and until it's built, they're not going to be happy. But every single mile that's built gets more votes for Trump in 2020. So that wall is really the number one campaign because people in America know we are being invaded. Now, when they talk about this specific win that he's having, there's many wins that he's having. First off, he has come up with all these things himself. Okay, he now says we're full. We're full. Sorry, you can't enter. Do you know that? We're full. Why? Because every single bed is taken and many, 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 many more. We no longer can do catch and release. Why? Because catch and release is always determined upon one of two things. Either that you're pleading asylum and you're going to be one of the 850,000 waiting to have a court case for asylum, which Trump has now shortened and says he's going to contain these people, hold them for 90 days, and they get their hearing, and then they get pushed back across the border because 95% of asylum cases do not get granted because it is not asylum. They're just coming up here because they've been propagandized on their television sets. But anyway, so the wait period has now been adjusted. Okay? No more catch and release. Because why? You can't find them later. And recently, it was shown that for $150, you can buy a child, and that gets you across the border, and then they don't separate. No, sorry, no more keep the families together. They're doing DNA testing, and then they're finding out that you're lying, and this is human trafficking. Okay, let me repeat that.
That is really good. And then you're not able to get asylum because you've already committed a major crime. Is this correct?
Massive major crime. You don't get asylum. You get to go to jail for the rest of your life for human trafficking because you bought this child for $150.
Great.
Okay, now this was one of the biggest things ever. Plus then saying, full, sorry. Now what you're hearing is a lot of talk. Why? Because these things these were all illegal actions by Obama. Every one of them. The catch and release, DACA, unaccompanied minors, the non-consanguinity testing, as well as once we're full, we just release them straight into the country. As a matter of fact, Obama didn't keep them at the border. And now I'm seeing the articles pop up again. Obama was caught human trafficking these children that were unaccompanied minors coming to the border. They were sent to chicken farms in Ohio. They were sent to places that are so grotesque to work that they were literally slaves. That was Obama. Obama making slaves out of human trafficked children coming to the border by offering this ability to not enforce our law. All of these things are simply because Obama did not enforce the law. DACA, they're now saying Trump is amenable to DACA. Remember, we told you before, DACA is his trick. DACA is basically, every time he says, I'm amenable to talk about amnesty in DACA, he just gained thousands and thousands and thousands of votes. He's not going to do that. This would be a road to citizenship. It would not include the parents. It would not include the anchor babies. And anchor babies were recognized during Obama's time as absolutely legal. No, they're not. There's no such thing as an anchor baby. So that's what's happening with this. Many things on the southern border are changing. People don't even notice it. The wall's going up. They don't notice it. The rules are changing. They don't notice it. And worse than that, better than that, is that the news of this is going back down the chain all the way to Central America saying, don't come. You've been lied to. You don't get free money. You don't get everything for free. You don't get free medical. You don't get everything that we're telling you on the television that you're going to get if you go to America as an invader. To basically cover up for the real invaders that have mixed in with some of the people who are actually coming up for to advance their life cause. But in general, no, they're filled with our enemies. That's what that invasion is about.
Okay, we have a tweet here from some people at Fox and Friends. Everyone wants to know who needs to be accountable because it took up to 2 years of our lives talking about this Russian involvement. It proved no collusion, and people want to trace it back to see how all this happened. He calls it, in big, bold, treasonous hoax. And then a little follow-up tweet. The British spy, Christopher Steele, tried so hard to get this fake dossier out before the election. Why?
Oh, we'll go to that one in a minute. But first off, treasonous hoax, that's the real message. It's no longer a witch hunt. It's a treasonous hoax.
It's not even a hoax.
Treason.
It's treason.
Jail. When you say treason, you say jail.
You're talking about execution. Capital punishment for treason.
Under certain circumstances,
yes.
Yes.
Under certain circumstances, but...
And again, Fox and Friends, I am yawning. Oh, I'm sorry to yawn on tape, Betsy, but it's so boring that they don't take it the next step. Give them some evidence. Don't stand back and now make your general ridiculous statements. Give evidence. Real evidence. Not circumstantial evidence, okay? Give the evidence that you'll find in the crime line of the Americans for Innovation. Give the evidence you'll find in intelligence reports for Aim for Truth. That's what's needed. What is going on right now it's a yawn for me. Oh my gosh, these people are finally woke. It's disturbing that they were simply reading their prompters instead of doing some investigative journalism. And what is very disturbing, I know certainly to Betsy and certainly to me, is that Fox News calls on Sarah Carter and John Solomon to basically define the envelope that you're going to stay in. Whatever they're reporting is supposedly the cutting edge, the deepest, the most, there's nothing beyond it. Oh my gosh. And both of them have nothing but anonymous sources. They seldom ever give you anything that isn't either in the news or basically never proven who their sources are, and the evidence is never given. So they define the envelope, and that's what keeps Hannity and Lou Dobbs and the whole group in line. You don't go beyond what these two globalist reporters, Sarah Carter and John Solomon, are giving you. That is it. Anything else? Like if you want to say any of the things that we say, I could go on with 1,000 of them, that, who Joseph Mifsud really is. He's a friend of Hillary Clinton. He was a operative for the Clinton Foundation. Hello! Joseph Mifsud, who she tried to sue, and in her lawsuit said he was dead, presumed dead.
Well, how come John Solomon isn't reporting that if you know it? How come he's not reporting it?
They don't want you to leave the farm. They don't want you to go beyond the barriers, the gates.
John Solomon is nothing more than the propagandist for the Queen. He
is just maintaining the limitations of the envelope of what the globalists will allow. They don't want people to wake up too soon. He will not point at all the people we point at in Britain.
Well, because the word treasonous hoax, really, you're saying it's treason, but it's more than that. We're also talking about international espionage, the likes of which the world has never seen. It's so big and huge. It involves so many international players. We have to face this threshold with full consciousness, because if we don't take out this darkness on Earth...
Well, to evolve beyond the Earth. And yes, some people are turning the Earth into a trash can, but there's also places that are becoming paradises. There's also the option that we can simply not go to other planets, but simply go into our own atmosphere.
Oh, please, traveling to other planets. We need to straighten up this world. Let's move on to the next tweet.
Well, okay, that's exactly what I didn't address, so let me go on. So, I'm sorry, but who's this? Kilmeade and Fox and Friends? You're asking this question?
Well, again, just more people in the fake news media just keeping the conversation at a very basic blah, blah level.
You can't even have a conversation with these idiots because they don't know enough to have a conversation. Here is why, we'll say it for the 100th time, Christopher Steele was doing what he was doing. It was part of 28 different treasonous crimes of Comey that were all supposed to be October surprises that Comey got so excited about that he started springing them back in December, and the Christopher Steele thing started in March. There were 17 sections, 11 installments went up to December. So he wasn't rushing to get it done. What kind of... Did any of these people read the report? No, obviously not. Obviously not. You literally have people reporting on Fox News who have never read the Christopher Steele report.
They are not very bright people at Fox News, and I keep bringing this up because so many people watch Fox News thinking they're getting real truth.
And they miss the entire point. The entire point of the Christopher Steele document, just like the Franklin Furor Trump Tower server scam, which was paid for by Comey. We, the people, paid for those professors to come up with those fake lies that Franklin Furor printed. And then he brought them forward in October, just before the election. Late October, and Comey came, but he accidentally brought them forward months before because it leaked. And because it leaked, the October surprise was not effective. So therefore, on October 31st, one day after Franklin Furor released the Trump Tower server, which is still part of the dossier, that's in the dossier, which proves to you how far back the dossier was created. If Franklin Furor's thing, which started far into early spring, those professors were doing the research. So the dossier was created long before July, late July, when Crossfire Hurricane started this complete lie. So what we're really talking about is that they are too stupid to know that Christopher Steele never, ever intended to let anyone see those documents. He testified, because he's in two different lawsuits, both in D.C. and in London, but he testified that there were people from the press that he allowed to have the report in their possession for hours when he went to lunch, and it is possible they could have taken pictures of it. Then we know that it was John McCain's Step and Fetch It boy, David Kramer, who made sure that BuzzFeed got a copy of it, and then they printed the whole thing, which was never supposed to happen because it's too fake. Had you looked at it, you'd know it's fake. It was never supposed to be released. It was supposed to be talked about. Christopher Steele was paid by the FBI to meet with 6 different mainstream media outlets, which he did repeatedly, along with members of Fusion GPS, as well as other government officials and representatives from the Democratic National Committee, Samuelson and others. They met with these people to give them the words to go put on their news. But when Christopher Steele got caught giving away the whole thing and BuzzFeed printed it, the game was up. Do you think that stopped Christopher Steele? No. He then used the Bruce Orr, as a back channel to the FBI that he'd just been fired from and the DOJ he'd just been fired from. And he continued to release them. And the FBI, even after he was fired, James Comey had a check written for the last installment for December. So he wasn't really fired from the FBI. That was all just fake. So when you talk about Christopher Steele, he was their interface with the news, just like Devlin Barrett was the interface and paid by Fusion GPS. Daniel Richman, who was Comey's lawyer, who was an institutionalized leaker, he was literally on the payroll of the FBI. Alvy Watkins, the prostitute who had sex with James Wolfe. James Wolfe got 2 months in prison for one of the biggest leaking jobs ever done out of the Senate Intelligence Committee or any committee ever. So you have these prostitutes, right? Well, that's what Christopher Steele was working with. These people who were paid to release this information, knowing it was salacious, unverified, knowing that he'd been fired by the FBI, and yet it continues. So for those who ask the question, why was he rushing to get the document done? You're stupid. He wasn't rushing. He was going to continue to write installments until he was fired. He'd still be writing installments to this day. As a matter of fact, Fusion GPS, $12 million, then went to Daniel Jones, who was Dianne Feinstein's Senate Intelligence Committee staffer, working with James Wolfe, the leaker, started his own group got $50 million from Oleg Deripaska, George Soros, Rob Reiner in Hollywood, and many other Hollywood people that you see coming out of the news every single day. You want to know why? Because they put up $50 million to continue the opposition research against Trump after he was the president. In other words, attacking a sitting president. This is a national security violation. You cannot threaten the president. You cannot attack them. You cannot create oppositional research and use it for a coup. This is the proof. Okay, sorry, Fox News. You're so far behind. You're so far behind the news that I don't even know how to address your stupid questions. But that's my answer to your stupid question of why.
People say, why don't you bother with CNN? I go, because they're meaningless, worthless, and they've already shown us who they are. The reason we beat up with Fox News is because they keep telling you that they are the news. They're not. They're a bunch of idiots sitting on a couch, and they haven't caught up as far as you, the listener to this show.
Oh,
so
easily.
All right. So anyway, it was great. Are we going anywhere? No, we're staying right here.
We have listeners who I read the remarks that are more profound and more point on than the Senate and the House representatives. Our listeners. Because why? They looked at the evidence, they drew their own conclusions, and they're far, far, far beyond anything going on Capitol Hill.
Thank you so much, Thomas. We'll see you again real soon with another batch of tweets.
Thank you, Betsy.